Today we'll be discussing how violent video games stress people out and make them more aggressive. Video games come in many different genres, like adventure, first-person shooter, simulation, racing and or sports, and etc. The most popular play video games involve some type of violence. For instance, the PC game Among Us. You get to play online with 4 to 10 players. Everyone is trying to fix their spaceship, all while not being able to communicate with one another. You will only be able to communicate with each other when there is a crewmate meeting, which is at the end, and or when a body is found by one of the crewmates or even the imposter. This causes difficulties in trying to stay alive because an alien imposter is killing your teammates. The game looks very colorful and cute and seems to distract from the violence that is going on within the game. When most people play video games, the intent is to receive a sense of relief or the belief that they are relaxing. However, when it comes to playing violent video games, they may not know that violent video games can cause stress, which can also lead to increasing one's aggression. In psychology, aggression can be defined as behavior or a response intended to hurt someone, break something, or even harm oneself. This can be demonstrated in verbal, physical, and emotional behavior. It is also important to note that aggression can be triggered due to the increase of anger to show and state one's dominance, or because someone may be experiencing fear. Studies demonstrate that violent video games, such as the popular video game franchise Call of Duty, induce stress levels and rage within people. Within this article, Violent Video Games Stress People Out and Make Them More Aggressive, its case study determined and examined whether or not violent video games increased aggression by provoking stress in players. The stress levels were measured by using cardiac coherence. Cardiac coherence measures the heart rhythm pattern of how deep and slow breathing was controlled, and or positive emotions. The main purpose of the study was to determine if violent video games brought more aggressive behavior out on its volunteered players than those who were playing non-violent video games. Seeing that stress levels do increase while playing violent video games, it would be a challenge to capture aggressive behavior from participants, as there's no real way to determine or measure if a violent video game could bring that emotional behavior out of someone. Within this study, there were 77 male and female participants. Research explained to the participants that they were there to help with the study on the effects of how bright the video game screen was and if it caused any psychological arousal. By keeping the real reason for the study of if violent video games cause stress to increase, which led to aggression increasing in them, hidden from participants, it would allow the study's results to stay unbiased or unaltered. It was predicted that playing a violent video game would decrease cardiac coherence. Cardiac coherence was measured before and during gameplay, and the study was done 25 times to measure stress and aggressive behavior between the participants playing violent and non-violent video games. Cardiac coherence has several desirable operational features as well. It is non-invasive, stable against environmental disturbances, relative inexpensive, not subject to demand characteristics, and easy to use. A stress pilot device was used to measure heart and the breathing rate of 6 breaths. The device on its own would randomly choose 6 breaths the volunteer took while playing the game. Each volunteer was randomly selected to play both non-violent and violent video games for the maximum time of 20 minutes. The video games chosen for this study were between these violent games: Condemned 2, Call of Duty 4, and The Club. And these 3 non-violent video games: Dirt 2, S3K Superbike, and Pure. It seemed that the researchers chose violent video games that were age-based on 18 years and over, while the other video games were based on 10 years old and younger. After playing, the volunteers would have to rate the games based on how boring, exciting, frustrating, and/or violent each game was by using the number 1 as not at all to 7 as extreme scale. Then another experiment was conducted in which the winner would blast loud noises through a pair of headphones that were placed on the loser's head. The winner was able to control the length in which the loser had to have the headphones on that play loud noises between level 1 or level 10 being the most painful. This determined the level of aggressive behavior. This study shows that once the person is winning, they can be placed in this shift of being able to determine how long the loser player would be suffering. Therefore, I believe this study doesn't show aggressive behavior being measured caused by violent video games, but the competitiveness of the players and the fact that they don't have to go through suffering if they win the game, not if they're aggressive due to the game itself. The results after the method were that non-gender differences, as predicted, violent video games were graded higher of being more violent or aggressive than non-violent video games, based on 3 different violent video games and 3 non-violent video games. The cardiac coherence measured the non-violent and violent video games against the length of gameplay. Those participants who played violent video games demonstrated lower cardiac coherence than the people who were playing one of the 3 non-violent video games. The results of cardiac coherence indicated the random assignment was conducted to obtain the effective outcome. In the end, aggressive behavior was determined by how long the winner would leave the loser suffering listening to the headphones. Aggressive behavior seemed a bit biased from a winner perspective. If the tables were turned and the winner was the loser, aggression and stress levels may have a different outcome. Personally, due to my own experience with video games over the years, I don't believe that violent video games are the cause of stress that leads to increasing aggressive behavior in people. I base it on the competitiveness of the environment in which they are placed in. The goal is to beat your opponent in any match or game, to win. And when you lose, it can bring emotional increase of disappointment, sadness, and or anger. What I would do to see if the stress and aggression increase within players is to test different types of video games that are known for competitiveness.